Hello, welcome to Post Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I'll briefly talk about a certain specific ethics of publication. Now, you might have noticed that occasionally when you're writing about something and you are arguing a point against someone else's previously published work, sometimes there might be a desire, probably even unacknowledged, to cut short their argument or extract something out of context, make that into a point, and then challenge it with your own assumptions. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most unethical scholarly action that you can take. And there are reasons for it. First of all, it's an act of epistemic violence to the argument of the person to whom you're responding, because you're not acknowledging their whole argument and not placing their statements within the context of their thesis and their argument. You're just extracting what is useful to you and then mobilizing it to your own purpose. Secondly, it's also wrong in terms of sound scholarship, because your own argument then can very easily be dismantled by pointing to that you have misread this other person, right? Or worse, you misquoted them, right, to make your own point. So it doesn't matter what kind of writing you are engaged in. It could be for a classroom, it could be for a publication, in a newspaper, in a journal. If you do this, if you truncate someone's argument, pick it up and make it sound like something that you have an opinion against, that is not just intellectual dishonesty. It also will then prove to your readers that at worst you do not have the intellectual depth to actually read someone carefully and then respond to it. The worst case scenario is that you could be construed as someone who's willing to dupe his readers or her readers simply by misstating something from someone else's work and then building an argument against it. Now, the reason I've decided to, record this and share it with you is, first of all, on a general plane, I think it is important to keep these things in mind as scholars, right? And that when we write with a certain degree of public responsibility, but also responsibility to ourselves and our readers. And more importantly, because it seems to have happened to me, someone picked up 2 of my articles that I had published, which were dealing with a very complex issue and working through those issues through complex theory, and reduced my argument to 2 or 3 sentences from both the articles and then built a whole argument around it. Now, the next point then is, what do you do as a scholar when something like that happens, right? The basic instinct is, of course, to just go and challenge that person and say, this is wrong. I don't believe in that anymore, because it takes a lot of energy to get involved in these spats, in the grand hierarchy of things. What do they matter? But more importantly, if someone is doing that, if someone is knowingly reducing your argument to a few little snippets that they can mobilize towards arguing whatever they are arguing, maybe responding to them is not necessarily the thing to do, because then all you do is you give them more space to perpetuate their misinformation. So what I decided in my case was, not to say anything, not to directly write anything about it, but I did learn from it, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, so that you, as potential scholars, keep this in mind. First of all, be honest to other people's work. If you cite them, cite it with a clear understanding. Point out where they're coming from, what's the context of their statement. This is something that I teach my students every single day, right? We tell our students not to shape quotes into something that the author might have not intended, or even if the author might have intended that was within a certain specific context, you take out that context, you're misquoting the author, right? But also, more importantly, because I teach my students that even when you are disagreeing with someone, right, there are ways of doing it. There are ways of doing it. You can write a completely, an argument that refutes someone else's statements and someone else's claims, but do it in a way that comes across as a generous scholarship, that it has a certain degree of graciousness and grace in it, right? So that the other person comes up to you and says, hey, thank you so much for reading my article carefully and offering a well thought out response to it. And I did that in my own graduate school. I was taking a course on modernism with the chair of our department. He had published an article on Conrad. I built on that and I wrote an article which basically suggested that if he had read Conrad this way, he could have reached a different conclusion. And I turned it in as a term paper. And some of my colleagues, graduate students, asked me, do you really want to do that? And I was like, yeah, he's a scholar and I'm being professional. I'm not misquoting him. And sure enough, that was the case. I got an A in the paper and he said, Masood, if I were to write it today, I'll write it differently. And he was gracious as a senior scholar, and I was kind, generous, and respectful as a junior scholar. And this is what I teach all my graduate students to do. So, keep in mind, be honest in your engagement with other people's works. Don't extract from it what is useful to you without engaging with their full argument. And then don't write something with that kind of abstracted material, because it makes you look bad and it makes your argument weak and prone to attack from all the different directions. And most importantly, even when you're agreeing with someone in your writing, be gracious, be kind, be generous. So I hope this is useful to you as scholars and writers, and that you can use it. And let me know what you think. And if you have any suggestions, anything that you have noticed and would like to bring to my attention, please feel free to put it in the comments below. As always, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you so much for your support. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so that you get timely notifications. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And as always, peace and love.